Welcome to the Joe Pavich Podcast. This show is all about what got people where they are today. Work-life mix, struggles, the grind, the process, and the message. Welcome to the Joe Show. Today I'd like to introduce my guest, Keith Primeau. Keith is a former center, 15 seasons in the NHL. That's crazy, by the way. Red Wings, Whalers, Hurricanes, Flyers. Today we're going to talk about the drive, the mindset, the struggles, getting to the NHL, and the career afterwards. So good to see you, Keith.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Thank you so much for coming out today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Glad it worked out.
Brought some cold weather over here in Florida,
exactly.
man.
I didn't intentionally do it, but it followed me. Hopefully it turns here in the next couple of days.
Looks like it's it's going to hopefully heat up a little bit, but who cares? We're in Florida and
sky is blue and
it's still golfing weather regardless, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So Keith, the family, the whole family's in hockey, right? Was it your dad played?
So
your
interestingly enough, it wasn't my dad that got me into hockey. It was my mother.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. We were living in a town called Markham, Ontario, in Canada, just outside Toronto, and my mom signed me up, and she grew up in Northern Ontario, home of Frank Mahovlich, who was legendary player for Montreal Canadiens for a long time, and when she registered me, they were looking for coaches as well. And my dad had 2 businesses of his own at the time, and a lot of travel to the Middle East and so forth. And my dad's like, I can't afford to do this. I don't have the time to coach. Inevitably, he ended up coaching, and he coached me for every year that I played minor hockey.
Oh, wow.
Except for 1 year that he went back and coached my younger brother.
Nice.
And then when I left to go play junior hockey at 15, he coached my brother. So he was a head coach at minor hockey, youth hockey for 20 plus years, and coached a lot of guys that end up in the NHL. And he became very passionate. And people say to me too, like, my dad was an electrician. I never wanted to be an electrician. They say you want to follow in the footsteps of your father. When I reflected after I finished playing, I got heavily involved, invested in my boys playing, and coached them all the way through.
Oh, nice.
And I always kind of felt that I guess I did follow my dad's footsteps.
Yeah, coaching's a full-time job, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't know just how true that statement is. As I said, I went back and after my playing days and when my boys got involved in the sport, I ended up coaching both of them. At the highest, I was coaching 4 teams in one winter, but I also had some semi-pro opportunities when I first started. When I was first out of the game, and I could get out of my business obligations. I couldn't get out of my voluntary coaching positions because people felt like, they're paying this amount of money. They've paid this money for this specific individual, being me, and they wanted what they wanted, and I couldn't, and I felt conflicted. I really felt that I had an obligation, and I couldn't get out of this voluntary role. It was crazy.
It's amazing. My son Jake plays bass. Joey does too. The whole family plays sports. But Jake, I coached him I still do. And there was one time, Keith, I couldn't make one game. And I said to Jake, I said, hey, buddy, I got an event this weekend. I said, just one day. I'm going to miss one game. And I said, your friend Will, your dad, the family, you go with them, have some fun. I said, it'll be fine. Go take you for ice cream afterwards, try to really sell it to him. He says, you can't go, Dad. You're my coach. I said, buddy, yeah, but I said, it's one event. He goes, Dad, you have to go. You have to come to my game. I said, you're right.
It truly is amazing.
So I canceled.
Yeah.
I canceled.
So there you go. It's truly amazing how impressionable kids are, and the things that they remember and the things that will impact them over the course of their childhood. I have 3 boys, 1 girl. All boys played hockey. My daughter, I can count on one hand the number of times she's on skates. And she did it out of spite. She wanted no part of it. I've got nieces that play, high-level hockey. But she did have passion, passion for sports. She played soccer and she played lacrosse.
Oh, nice.
And so I grew up playing box lacrosse in Canada. And so I said to my wife the one summer, they were starting a rec league team in our hometown in New Jersey. And I said, I'm just going to call the township and just say, listen, I just want to chase balls. I just want to be on the field with my daughter because she's missing out because I'm with my boys all the time. And they said, okay, well, let me take it back to the commissioner. And a week later, I get a call and said, well, we have enough girls at that age group. Would you be interested in coaching the second team?
Wow.
It was unreal. What you know?
There you go.
Yeah,
Back on.
And guess what my daughter's profession is now? She has her own lacrosse program.
Nice.
Coaches over 100 girls, camps and clinics, teams. And
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's it's a great feeling.
That is so awesome. What inspires me so much about you is just you're a normal guy. Just a big guy, but a big normal guy. You're a family guy. You got 3 kids. When you're a parent, it's tough because you have so much time you want to spend with each kid. You always have that parent guilt, right? I'm not spending enough time with Jules. I'm spending more time with Joey. I need to reverse that a little bit, and it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy when you have kids that are all involved in sports, all involved in school and friends and different activities, and trying to juggle that. And so, I owe my wife a lot of credit because, like you said, I played for 15 years.
Sure.
So I was away for a big chunk of those younger years. I do have 4. I have my oldest one as well, who played, who's a few years older than the 3 younger ones. But I was off playing the year I lived in Raleigh, Durham, playing for the Hurricanes, and their closest game was 4 hours away in Hampton Roads, and then so she's packing up 4 kids in a SUV I had to fly my dad down to travel with my wife because it's too much, and so I give her a lot of credit. She held down the fort until I was done playing.
Divide and conquer, right? It's insane. So 15 years, man. That's a long career, especially like in hockey. I mean, listen, other sports, golf or something, I mean, it's different, right? I mean, you are, God, on the ice, you're playing hard for that long. What was it like?
It was a demanding sport. Early on in my career, it wasn't the 12 months of the year it is now. I was one of the few guys that it was because I enjoyed working out. I enjoyed being in the gym. I worked out in season, but there wasn't a lot of guys. In salaries, 35 years ago, we're still at levels where guys needed summer work. So training camp back then was 4 weeks. You'd come in to get into shape. Now it's 3 days. If you don't come into shape, you don't have a job. And so the game is certainly demanding. It's not it's very challenging. It's not for everybody. And truly only the strong will survive because the game doesn't owe you anything. It'll chew you up and spit you out in a hurry. And so you have to be prepared not only physically but mentally. But at the same time, I say that, and it afforded me a wonderful life as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's always the grind, right? It's the process through it. And tell me a good hockey story.
Well, you'd have to, So, I mean, I got lots of different hockey stories that I mean, I'll tell you, maybe one of my youth stories. I grew up playing in another small town just outside Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Whitby, Ontario, and as I said, my dad was heavily invested in my game and my development, and the local community hall had bingo every Friday, and you could get a license to run the bingo. So my dad, I don't know if he won a lottery or, anyways, our team won the Friday after every second Friday afternoon, and parents had to donate 5-6 times a year. Then we ended up making so much money that they were buying our sticks and our equipment, and we also funded a trip to Finland, Russia, and Sweden. Wow. when I was 13 years old, and that was we played 13 games in 20 days. And the coolest one was actually playing on an outdoor rink in St. Petersburg, Russia, when it was still communist. And we rolled up on our bus, snow up to the boards, and we go out there. In the first period, we're up 5-0, and the benches, you could see their bench. It was dark, but you could see their bench over here. And there's a lot of rustling going on. And as the game goes on, the players keep getting bigger.
Yeah.
And so by the second period, it was about 8-8. By the end of the game, it was 13-8. And they'd probably dressed 60 kids. And they started with the younger kids. And by the end of the game, the older kids were playing against the better kids. But I'll never forget that experience. It was one of those memories that I'll take.
Oh, that's a great story. You know, it's truly amazing because like hockey through the years, right? I mean, I look at even baseball. Hockey then and hockey now is a little bit different, right? Because hockey then, you know, you're practicing, you're doing everything. Like trips like that are awesome trips. But like now, this whole travel hockey thing. I mean, travel baseball is kind of a big deal, right? Every other weekend you're moving, but travel hockey, it's almost like you want to bring your teachers with you to travel for travel hockey, right?
And especially, you know what? Especially in the U.S. Because you have outposts like Florida, where the sport is developing, in Texas, where the game is growing, and Tennessee and California, where it was probably the first southern state that really got impacted when Wayne Gretzky got traded there. But there's just not enough numbers for them. So the really good players have to get together and travel up north, whether it's to Michigan or Mass or Ontario, and we were no different. We were in southern New Jersey, and we played in a league, but there was only 2-3 really good teams, and the bottom 8 teams were we're blowing the doors off them. And so parents had to make, it wasn't just the registration fee, it was the ice cost, it was the equipment cost, it was the travel cost, and it was upwards $15,000-$20,000 a season to play travel rep hockey, and that's what it is. That's the commitment level you have to make, and all fully aware that there is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
The percentage of players that get the opportunity to play even pro hockey and make money, and then the National Hockey League level is very, very small. But there's other reasons why you put your kids in sport as well.
Yeah, I wonder how small that percentage is.
It's below 0.0023%. And I know that because I just had this conversation with my son, Caden, who plays pro hockey.
That's right.
Literally 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great family, by the way. Your kids are great.
Oh, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So take me back. I'm going to go back to, Keith, right? When Keith was small, I don't know if you ever were small or not. Probably 6'10" when you were born, maybe. I don't know. But sports growing up. Any other sports besides hockey?
So I tried basketball. My hands were bad. No, I didn't have good hands. I played volleyball. I did like volleyball. I played box lacrosse, which I wasn't very good at because I just didn't have the stamina or wasn't a very good runner.
Yeah.
And rugby. I played rugby. Our school didn't have football. Didn't have the funding for football, but we played rugby. So contact sports.
Another tough sport.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the games that allowed me to hit other people.
Yeah. Rugby, that's a tough sport right there.
That really tough. Yeah.
So sports when you were younger. Now, getting as like you get in high school, right? Sports through high school as well?
So that's where I was first playing. That's where I was playing rugby. I was playing rugby in school, volleyball in school. Then after grade 10, that's when I moved away to play major junior hockey in Canada, which we do. We leave home at 15, 16, 17 years old to chase our dreams.
Yeah.
And so I left home when I was 15 years old. I have a late birthday, November birthday. So I was gone by the time I was 15. Didn't turn 16 until my first year out of the house. It was really difficult on my mom and my brother, my younger brother Wayne, who also played. And for me, it was just kind of the evolution. It was always what I wanted to do, and that was the first time when I started playing junior. It was the first time I actually thought that maybe this is a real opportunity. Maybe watching Toronto Maple Leafs on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night wasn't just cartoon fantasy. It was an actual reality.
Sure.
So I chased my dream for 3 years playing major junior before I was drafted by the Detroit Red Wings in the first round.
Wow. So straight out of high school.
I graduated. So Canada, we were 5 years university. I did it in 4.5. I did some summer courses so I could finish early.
Okay.
And the year I graduated high school, I was drafted, and my next year I was playing in Detroit. Yeah.
So what round was that? What draft?
I was first round.
Okay.
Third pick overall in the 1990 NHL Draft, and that was for anybody who's a hockey fan, that was one of the best first round NHL drafts there's ever been. Like if you look at the names that are on there, I was third overall, but Jaromir Jagr was 5 was number 5. He would have gone first if, again, he was in the communist blocks, the Eastern Bloc still in Czechoslovakia. But other first rounders, notable first rounders were Keith Kachuk, Marty Brodeur. I think there was only one player in that first round that didn't play in the NHL. Everybody else had like long careers.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Develop a lot of friends in the business, I'm sure, through time, right?
So you do, and I, those that you have relationships are usually end up being close friends. My first year in Detroit, I was you're talking about guys who are married and wives and children, and so as an 18-year-old, they're not hanging out with me. And I had one teammate, Yves Racine, who was a French-Canadian kid who was a couple years older, but he was a single guy. And we were pretty chummy. And Christmas time, my first year, he got traded. And that was a real hard, cold slap for me, because that was the epiphany moment for me where I realized that in a lot of instances, the people that you play with are just passing acquaintances. Yeah. So those friends, those guys that you are close to are true friendships. My closest friend, I would say, is Sami Kapanen, who lives in Finland. And we were roommates in Hartford, played together in Hartford, Carolina, and Philadelphia. Same line mates. He's a little bit of a mini-me. He's like 5'8", run through a wall, never go around it. And I never understood why, but that was just his mentality.
Yeah. That's amazing. It seems like sports back then, though, the teams were together a little bit longer, right? Now, the teams switch so much.
So free agency can have that impact. But certainly there's turnover, and I think you get continuity and you establish a good team by keeping a core group of guys together.
Sure.
I look at teams that have had success. Tampa Bay as an example. They have their core 6 or 7 guys that have been there. There does come up a point in time where they've passed their prime.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like teams can hold on too long because of services rendered. But in their prime, those teams are really good.
Yeah. So the draft happens after high school, right? So when do you meet Lisa, and when does that?
Yeah,
kids. When does all that start?
Sure. So I met Lisa my first year my second year in Detroit. My first year, I spent 2 months in the minors, but I was in Detroit the whole year. My second year, which is when I thought I began to establish myself, I got sent to the minors and spent 3 months in the minors, and I struggled with that. Although on reflection, it was probably the most fun I ever had playing pro hockey, because the stress level is way down.
Sure.
And in New York State, bars are open till 4 a.m. So it was a pretty good time. But when I got called back up, my second year, I met Lisa and courted her for 3.5 years before we got married in 1995.
Okay. Yeah. Which is what, 4 years, 5 years into your career?
Yeah, I was 5 years. 5 years into my career.
Now, when did kids start happening?
So my oldest one, Corey, is my stepson. We don't refer to him as my stepson because I've been a part of his life since he was 3 years old. And then the three younger ones, Kylie, my daughter's 29, just got married.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. My son Chase, who's 27, is getting married next summer. And then Caden, the youngest, is 25. And
Okay.
Corey, my oldest, has 3 kids, so I have 3 grandkids. Yeah, so we're busy.
You're a young grandpa, that's for sure.
I am, but I tell people too, I was a young father. I was a father of 4 by the time I was 27.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So what's it like, right? 5-6 years in, kids start happening, right? NHL, travel, work-life mix. I mean, talk to me about that.
There was a lot of challenges to it. People often ask me, what's the best thing about the game? And I said, the travel. And then what's the worst thing about the game? The travel. And it's like travel. I'm calling my wife at 6 o'clock at night from San Jose, and she's trying to get the kids to bed, and I'm going for dinner and a movie, and so but then you're away from your family as well.
That's got to be hard. Yeah.
So that's a real challenge. And then my first 6 years in Detroit wasn't all roses and rainbows. It took me, I wouldn't say I was a good pro until my fourth year. My first year, I had junior eligibility left, which means I could have gone back and played major junior. I wanted to go back and play, and management wouldn't let me. My second year, I got sent down, which I didn't want. And so I'm 18, 19 years old dealing with these frustrations. 2021, trying to find my way now as a National Hockey League player. Jaromir Jagr's two Stanley Cup champion, 2 Stanley Cups in, and the comparisons start unfairly start. And then early in my career, I fought a lot more than I did later in my career. So if I were to score 2 goals, they'd want to know why I didn't fight. If I fought, they'd want to know why I didn't score. So it was just
you're trying to find your way, right?
I really was, and I take responsibility for a lot of that. It didn't really handle it well. So by my 6th year, so my 5th year, we lost to New Jersey in the finals. My 6th year, we lost to Colorado in the semifinals. And after that, I asked to be traded, asked for a move. And then I went on and got traded to Hartford, and Detroit went on to back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. And
the year after you left.
After I left. And I'd asked to be traded.
Yeah.
And people, had a hard time because we were coming off the year we lost to Colorado in the semifinals. We were coming off the league record 62 wins, which Boston beat a couple years ago here, and then they end up losing the first round of Florida. Well, the year we won 62 and lost to Colorado, everybody thought that was the biggest upset ever. Colorado's sitting there with Patrick Waugh, Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Ray Bourque, Adam. I mean, they were just as stacked as we were. But that was. I had made that decision. I needed to change. If I know I was going to be the player that I wanted to, and knew I could be, I needed a change environment. So ultimately it all worked out, but I did miss out on an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Well, you got a great career, that's for sure. So those couple of years, right, where you kind of got sent down, you're having a hard time, but ended up being a good time in your mind, right? Because it's that grind. It's
only on reflection.
You get pushed back, right?
Yeah,
look back. Well, I'll tell you a good baseball story. So I was never really a good hockey guy. As a matter of fact, you don't want to see me skate too well. I'm a big body, but I'm not the greatest skater.
You might be able to skate better than I can hit a ball, though. So.
Yeah, well, maybe. So baseball was my life. I loved baseball. I was thinking after high school, they ask you what you want to be when you grow up. Baseball. That's all we knew. So that was my goal. So I go play for a local community college, and I'm thinking that I'm going to do pretty well there. We got some scouts coming out, the Cubs, the Marlins, all these teams are coming out to watch me. I'll never forget, 4 months in, Coach Cedarberg. If he's listening, Coach, you call me. No, I'm just kidding. But Coach Cedarberg basically says to me, Joe, we're going to have to cut you. And it was like, my life just was gone, right? I left, I cried, and I thought, baseball is my life. What am I going to do, right? I picked it back up, tried out for another team. I made the team, got cut again. It's tough. Those lessons when you get pushed down, you think the world's against you, right? Hindsight, you look back and go, I'm glad that happened to me, right? Because you learn so much, and if it happens in life to family, friends, we've been through it, right?
Yeah, it takes those experiences and the perseverance. You find out, your true character, and self-worth and self-reflection, and although they're not easy pills to swallow at the time, they become part of how you define yourself.
That's right. Yeah. So it's tough, and I tell that story because it's a good story of ways to pick it up, man.
Yeah.
To get to the next level, right? So, all right, one story, hockey story that I know about you was one of the best plays of that I could recall in hockey, right? 5 overtimes, right? Goal, you guys win the playoffs. What was that like? That was the highlight of that video was insane, man.
It was and so backstory on that a little bit was I'd been traded to Philadelphia that year from Carolina.
Yeah.
Again, this one was a holdout. I wish it wasn't a holdout. This was a contract. The first one was a holdout. This was a contract dispute. And so I was out until January when I got traded. So about to lose a whole season again. very few people know that I was nursing an injury and trying to get healthy. So in those contract again, I'm 27-year-old father, 28-year-old father of 4, nursing an injury, not sure if I'm ever going to play again, looking at my bank account and saying, like, I'm in trouble here.
Yeah. How many years in was that of the 15?
I was 10 years in.
Wow.
Yeah, and I made good money the first 10 years, but I didn't make great money until I got traded to Philadelphia, where I signed 2 contracts. So anyways, so we get into the playoffs, and we ended the year on a tear and ran through Buffalo in the first round and get in against Pittsburgh. And the first 2 games are at home, and they're a stacked team again too. They get Jagr's on that team and several other guys, and lose the first 2 at home. So now we got to go back to Pittsburgh, down 0-2, find a way to win game 3. So we're now 2-1. Game 4, it's 1-1, and we go into overtime. And I'll never forget, Alex Kovalev from the Penguins comes down, shoots from just inside the blue line, hits the post the first shift of the first overtime, and then it settles in, and then it's period after period after period, and I don't know if you remember back then they had those little gel packs, they were called Power Gels.
Oh yeah,
you remember they had that was really the first protein bar, Power Bar.
Yeah,
and then they came up with those Power Gels, and so when you're on the road, your team will order pizza for right after the game, and then you'll get to the plane and you'll have a meal. So the pizza was there because the end of the game, first overtime, pizza gets devoured. Second overtime, the Power Gels and the Power Bars get devoured. Third overtime, the coach's popcorn, their popcorn is getting, and now we got guys in the training room getting IVs to get rehydrated. But ironically, I still felt pretty good, other than lactic acid. 20 seconds into a shift, and you're like, you got to get off the ice. Your legs are just burning. But for those 20 seconds, I felt like I had good jump.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and because I missed till January. When I got traded to Philadelphia, I played 5 or 6 games, broke a rib, missed another 6 weeks. So I played 23 games that year. So I had lots of energy, lots of jump. And I just felt as long as Brian Boucher was our goalie, if he could just keep the puck out, which of course, if he keep the puck out, that I was going to find a way to score this goal. I was going to find a way to score this goal. And so I'd come off the bench on a line change and got the puck through the neutral zone. And the defenseman I was attacking was a defenseman named Darius Kasparaitis, who's a pretty dirty player in his own right. And 2 other times during the game, I had opened up and taken the puck wide. And the first time I ended up behind the net. And the second time I had met him at the net. So he'd kind of cut me off. So the third time here in the 5th overtime, I open up and he thinks I'm going to go wide again. And as he crosses over, I cut back and I let the shot go. And I still to this day say it wasn't a great shot. I think Ron Tugnutt was a goalie in Pittsburgh, was just tired and went over his shoulder and hit the middle bar. But it was a for lots of different reasons. For me, it was a pretty special moment. And then after the celebration on the ice,
which is a big celebration, by the way.
Exactly, which is hey, we're back in the series, and that's where you take back in the locker room and you're like, okay, big goal, but all we did was tie the series. It's still just a goal. Get my skates off, still have my gear on, go out into the back hallway, just kind of take a couple deep breaths, and I was like, okay, that's just a goal, but you do realize that this is going to grow bigger in lore as time passes.
Yeah.
And it has. When the city of Philadelphia and the Flyers fans did a poll of the top most memorable Flyers goals over the course of their history, I was 2 of them actually, and that one was a top 2 or 3, and people always ask me about that goal. I've played better games, but not had bigger goals.
Sure.
And just because of the longevity of it, like 8 periods, it's like that's almost 3 games. The game ended at 2:30 in the morning, and we're on the plane flying home, and I hear this like somebody sounds like they're throwing up, but they're dry heaving because they've got nothing in them.
Yeah.
And Eric Desjardins, who was an absolute warrior, was in there dry heaving. He had nothing in him to throw up, but he'd played, I think, 63 minutes that night, and his body fat is like 4%.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing to like. I had a little bit of girth on me, so I was okay. But yeah, it was a great memory.
It's amazing sometimes the great things in history that have happened at the moment. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Next day, the papers, people talking about it.
Yeah. Listen, that's something that I'll always take tremendous pride in. I believe that, you know, I played for 3 different organizations. Carolina, Hartford was one. That I'm a Flyer. That I'm a Philadelphia Flyer, and so that memory for me will be one that I'll remember forever.
Yeah. After that year, tell me about the rest of your career.
Yeah. So actually, ironically, a turning point in my career happened the next game into Pittsburgh. We went home for Game 5 2 days later. Actually, this was a Wednesday night game in Pittsburgh, and before the game, we were talking about how back then TV still controls it, but the game schedule, and we weren't playing Friday night. We were used to going back to every other night in the playoffs, and we weren't going Wednesday, Friday. We were going Wednesday, Saturday afternoon because the TV wanted the Flyers on the afternoon game. We were thankful after the game that we were Saturday afternoon because we all needed the time to recover. But it wasn't enough time for Pittsburgh to mentally regroup. We blew them out. We blew the doors off them. It was like 5-1 or something at home. Went back to Pittsburgh and ended up winning that game 2-1, a real close game. But in the first period, I won a face-off in the neutral zone and I drew it back and went D to D. And defenseman Dan McGillis threw a heater to me. It was behind me. And as I turn, their defenseman, Bob Bugner, who had been a coach in Florida here as well, steps up on me and catches me blindsided, and I'm laid out on the ice, and my arms are stuck in the air. You know, it wasn't my first concussion, but it was the concussion that, for me, started the demise.
And that's year what?
That was in 2000.
Okay.
That was in May of 2000.
Because it was what, 2000? What was your last year?
2006.
Six, yeah.
Yeah, but so I stay in a Pittsburgh hospital overnight. Mr. Snyder puts me on his plane. The next day, I fly home. We're going to start against New Jersey the next night. I have to go see the neurologist. Back then, they did what's called impact baseline testing. I think they still probably do some type of baseline testing for most youth sports and so forth. Impact baseline testing, and we did it every year when we went to camp. It was the same test over and over. So all you had to do is pretty much like memorize what you needed to do. So I knew what I needed to do, and so the neurologist, I come in and she goes, okay, Keith, like, you passed your baseline. There's nothing I can do, but please just be careful. Like, please be careful.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I laughed. I'm like, I'm fine.
I'm unstoppable.
I'm good. I'm fine. I walked down onto the main street. I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life because I had to focus so hard on passing that test. So I was concussed. I passed my baseline, but I was concussed. Went out 2 nights later, got in a fight with Randy McKay in the game. I survived it, but that one. So basically, in that summer, I felt my brain settling. Like I felt like floating because it's and settling over the course of the summer to get right. So if I would have had to keep playing, it would the second impact syndrome where it can be fatal. So I got lucky. I dodged a bullet there, but that was what I would say was a 2-day recovery. My third concussion was a matinee game in New York against the Rangers, and same thing, puck in the neutral zone, and Bobby Holik, who I think also is extremely dirty player that didn't back it up, give me a shot in the head on the left side, and it wasn't anything severe, but I went off and I went into the trainer's room and it was towards the end of the game, so they didn't send me back out. I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. It's okay. I got home and we had the next day off, so I didn't go to the rink. And then we had an afternoon game against the Rangers again. And I get in my car to drive down to the rink, and all of a sudden everything's moving on me. and I'm motion sick and I can't focus and I call the trainer. I tell him what's happening. He goes, turn around, go home. We'll get you down to the rink another day. You're not playing. So for that one, I was out for 6 weeks, and that was in 2004. And that's when I came back off of that injury and went on a tear. That was the best hockey I think I've ever played in my career. We went to that was the year we went to the conference finals again against Tampa Bay, and we lost in 7. Tampa went on to win the cup. But I was an animal. I was on it.
That's one of the things I liked watching about you. You were, balls to the wall. I mean, you were the Hulk.
Yeah, and I always tell people I wasn't the most talented. I wasn't the most skilled. I wasn't but nobody's gonna outwork me. I was just gonna compete like crazy.
You give it 1,000%. That's for sure.
Yeah, and say what you want after.
Yeah. Let's go back really quick on the concussion thing, right? So you were out for a while. I mean, what's it like? It seems like then concussions were different. They treat them differently now than today, right? Aren't they?
Totally different.
Yeah. So what happens now?
So and I was totally different. So that was 2 and 3 that whole story I walked you through. The first one was a game in Hartford, Connecticut with the Hartford Whalers, and I got hit in the side of the head, and was concussed. Went to the hospital, stayed in the Hartford hospital overnight. And they come in, and the doc comes in and goes, "Okay, nothing for a week, no practicing, no games." Yeah. And I was like, "Wow, how conventional is that? That's really cool." Only to get into
get back in the ice.
Exactly. But only to get further into my case history and realize that just because you said 1 week doesn't mean that in 1 week I'm healed. It's not a light switch. Your brain doesn't all of a sudden. So as much as I appreciated that, when I look back on it, that's how primitive it was back in the late 90s, that I'm thinking they're doing this wonderful thing when in reality I'm probably going back on the ice still concussed, but I give myself a week off when the year before they probably put you right back out.
Sure.
So concussion 4 was so 2004 playoffs end. 2004-2005 season is obliterated by the lockout. We come back in 2005, and feeling good, feeling healthy, and 9 games in, I killing a penalty in Montreal. Shot goes off the goaltender. I turn around, guys coming flying in for the rebound, and takes me out. And I'm down on the ice, and my wife was watching the game on TV, and my parents. And I'm literally laying there, and I'm like, okay, how do you feel? And I'm processing. I'm walking through all of this stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I get to the bench, and it's basically the same thing. End of the game, and go to the locker room, and we're still on the road, and I actually play in Carolina a couple days later, and I'm in a fog, and I don't correlate the two at the time. I'm like, man, my legs feel heavy. I don't feel good. And then we traveled to Ottawa for a game, and I wake up from an afternoon nap, and I'm like I feel like I'm going to throw up, and so they pull me out, and I go get evaluated, and this time they start to do therapy, vestibular eye therapy, whatever I wanted. I was doing Reiki, massage, acupuncture, prolotherapy, vestibular. So, and I tried for the better part of that, for the rest of that year, 05, 06 season, to try and get back. Go into the summer, trying to get back. Go back for the start of the 06 season, and I'm still not right. But I said to the trainer, I go, I'll never forget, I walk into Jim McCrossan, who's our head athletic therapist, office, and I go, camp's still 2 weeks away. I'll be fine. I'm almost there. And he listened to me. And then all of a sudden he goes, Keith, appreciate your effort. It was valiant, but as a professional, I can never give you permission to play again. And that was it. That was the end of my career.
Yeah.
And so I'm driving home, and my first instinct was relief. I was like, because if he doesn't tell me that I'm never going to let you play again, I just keep trying. I'm just going to keep trying.
That's right.
I'm going to go and I'm going to go until finally I'm back on the ice. And just because you retire doesn't mean that the symptoms go away. I was 7 years post-concussion after my fourth document concussion in 2005 before I felt any semblance of normalcy.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about today?
Really good.
Good.
I feel good. Yeah.
You look great.
It's been a long journey, and since 2012, we're 2025. There's been lapses. I've had spells where I don't feel great, but in the last 2 or 3 years, I felt really good. I've been seeing a neurosurgeon out in Denver, who's helped me a lot.
Yeah. When you play balls to the wall, 15 years, that's a lot. I mean, one of the things I love about you is your aggressiveness on the ice, man. I mean, you were a killer out there. A lot of fights.
So
how many fights in the NHL?
So I was, I fought. I wasn't a fighter. I did hate when somebody said, "Oh, he doesn't fight," because I fought. I didn't mind when somebody said I wasn't a fighter, because that wasn't. I didn't want to be recognized as a fighter, because I knew I had more of a skill set. I scored 600 points in the National Hockey League. So I prefer being called a power forward. But in total, I don't know the exact number, but I was north of 100. Which is averaging. Early in my career, I was averaging 8 to 10 fights a year.
Yeah.
Later in my career, it was less.
Yeah. It's funny with fighting like that. I mean, you ever fight with a player, and then next thing you know, they're on your team, or you become friends, and you get a chance to kind of relive that fight?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had that lot. So the one guy. So yes, that happens. And the one guy that I fought several times was a guy named Kelly Chase. And we ended up being teammates in Hartford. A super good guy, and most of those guys that are fighters by profession are probably the best humans you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
They just have this different level of respect for combatancy, and just very humble people.
I feel like hockey is one of those sports too, where if your team is your everything, right? Everybody is tight on the team. It's different than other sports, or there's some individual players, right? You want to be the best you can, but hockey's different, right?
Yeah. And
you could beat each other up and then say after the game, "Hey man, good punch. How did that feel?
Yeah,
I knocked your tooth out,"
And
right?
that was, and there was lots of different ways guys handle that. One thing drove me crazy was when my teammates were tapping other guys on the other team on their shin pads during the game. Nothing would drive me more crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this is a competitive environment. They're not your friend. You need to play against them like you're playing to win.
Yeah.
And go for a beer after all you want. I don't care. Do what you want. But in the heat of the moment, I'm going to strangle the life out of you.
Yeah. You give it my best, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, normal guy during the day, on the rink, an animal. Like, tell me about the mindset, the switch. When you step on the ice, it was like, you were just 1,000 miles per hour. How does that work out?
So, how I manage, 2 lives was, when I went to the rink, or was on my way to the rink, I was 100% focused on what my objective and my mission was. And when I left the rink, I learned to leave the game at the rink. And that benefited me later in my career. Early in my career, I couldn't do it. I was just, a single guy early in my career, and I didn't have these other obligations. And so the game was your whole life.
Yeah.
But as I got older and more mature and more experienced, I learned to differentiate between the two.
Yeah.
But I had to put that game face on. I had to put that focus into play. I would go down for an afternoon nap, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I would sleep maybe an hour. So I was up 2:30, 3 o'clock at the latest. And as soon as I got up, I had to leave and go to the rink. So I was at the rink 3.5, 4 hours before game time. I was there an hour. It used to be like a little game between me and Stu Grimson, who's also a tough guy. His nickname is the Grim Reaper, if that tells you anything. He and I both. He had 4 kids as well, 3 girls and a boy. I had 3 boys and a girl, but we would both be there an hour before any of the other guys showed up, just because that's what we needed to do in order to get ourselves ready to play.
Yeah. I was talking to Joey, my son, today about getting there early, stretching, being ready, be the first guy in the field. That's awesome that you did that. Just shows that I'm here, man. Let's go.
Yeah, and that was it's
early,
mentally exhausting.
Yeah,
it is mentally exhausting. You have to be prepared to put in that effort. But
you're not early, you're late, right?
That's right. Like, puck drop is 7:00. Make sure you're there and present. But yeah, I just had this routine. That's the stretch, the meditation, the getting game sticks ready, my warm up, all that stuff had a time slot, and I had an objective, and that's what I was gearing towards.
I love that. Leave the game on the ice.
And like I said, it took me, like, I work on that with my son Caden now, who, like I said, plays in the Montreal organization, and he struggles to sleep after games. I'm like, you gotta figure out a way. You gotta find a way, because you need that rest. But I remember by the time I ended my career, I could be home from the rink downtown and in my bed between 11 and 11:30, and I could be asleep by 11:30.
Sounds like me. Gone, head down.
Yeah, and we MSG, we would take the train right out from underneath, right downstairs MSG. So the game would end. We'd get on the train and go to 30th Street Station, downtown Philadelphia. I could be in my front door midnight, a little after midnight, and I could be asleep by 12:30 after finishing a game at Madison Square Gardens.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's one of the questions I always ask people: is the light switch at night? Can you turn it off? You can.
Yeah, I could.
I can too.
But it wasn't my whole career. It was late in my career when I was comfortable in my skin.
Yeah.
And I knew who I was, and I knew, that I my performance was as best as I could.
First part of your career, you couldn't do that.
I couldn't get over. I relived every play, every minute, every mistake, every shift, and that's what happens, right? It gets going in your mind, and you have to find a way to count sheep. I don't do whatever. You got to get it out of your mind, because
it's really hard to do that for a lot of people.
It
is to forget about yesterday and worry about right now.
Yeah,
nothing you can do about yesterday.
Yeah.
So the wheels are turning, right?
Yeah.
So pro athletes tend to do well in business, right? Because of the drive, the focus, determination. What's the new venture now after hockey? I don't see you as a guy that could just sit down and relax.
First thing when I finished playing was I went back to school, even when I was concussed, and I got my degree. My wife doesn't have her degree. She had a high school diploma. I had my high school diploma. But I wanted my kids to go to school, and I felt that it was important for me to have my degree to be able to say to my kids, you need to get your degree.
Yeah.
And
that must have felt great to do that, to go back in, right?
It was, and it was a promise to myself, but as much a promise to my mom, who always wanted me, to get an education, and then the lesson for my kids. So it was important that I did that. But even when I was playing, the one part I felt I was wasting away was my mind. The conversation in the locker room is not always intellectual, or stimulating. It's a lot of sport and mostly hockey, and I felt like I literally was wasting my mind. Like I should have read more when I played. I didn't, and I was always restless. Like I always. So as soon as I finished playing, I also opened several businesses. I was in real estate and property holding and food and beverage industry and because they were all the things I was thinking about when I was playing, and then that didn't work because I had too many things going, and I had to figure out a way to consolidate. In the process of that, I did start a hockey equipment company when I was playing, built that up and sold it to Crocs Shoes. and then bought into a reusable box business based out of Montreal in 2011, which I just exited in the last 3 or 4 months and did extremely well. So yeah, I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And now I'm still working in that business, but I am wondering what my next adventure is, because I get antsy and stir crazy.
I love that though, because all those things you wanted to do, you just did them after you had a moment to breathe, right? It's like, for me, like in real estate, there's always these things I want to do, and they can take their toll on you, right? Mindset, you start thinking about all the things you got to do versus just writing them down, crossing them off, and doing it.
Yeah, and that's the way I've always lived my life. Is like, you've got a laundry list of items to do, make a list and check them off.
Yeah.
But I had so many things going that I couldn't manage it.
Yeah.
So I said I consolidated. I either sold pieces off or closed them or merged them with somebody else, or sold them to family or friends, and then just really focused on the core business of the reuse, the corrugate.
Yeah.
Because I always felt it had the best potential.
You get to a point where you can take risks at different things, right?
So
you can do that.
So yeah. I was always very conservative with what the biggest investment I had made before I bought into the reusable box, the corrugated business, was the hockey equipment company, and I was the only one funding it. And that's an expensive venture when you've got to bring in container loads of product before you've sold it, and so you've got money invested in this inventory and the stress of of moving it. But I always had my personal family nest egg priority here, and whatever extra little. So I never overextended myself. I never took out business loans. If I couldn't fund it or finance it myself, I didn't do it. It was just my mentality, because I was okay with having 4 or 5 small businesses. I didn't need to have $1 billion business.
That ties back to around year 8, 9, right? For you.
Yeah.
You kind of hurt yourself. You're out a little bit of time. You're starting to worry. You're not getting as much ice time, worried about money, right? Kids, all these crazy responsibilities. It's like, you're it's like a wound that you still have. Like for me, in 2005, 6, and 7, real estate market it got pretty bad, right? So it's like, even though now things are going pretty well, I still have a little bit of a wound in me that keeps a conservative side to where
100%.
you got, with kids, you got to keep that money here, and then maybe we can toy around.
By the way, that's when I was in the real estate business, was when the market was terrible. It was shit. But
you almost had to hold them for like 7, 8, 10 years.
And I didn't have the patience at the time, and I didn't. But I also had, when I was playing in Detroit, I had a property management company. We're doing modular homes, and I got in between two. Basically, my partner was a crook, and the guy that we were in business with was a crook, and it cost me a lot of money. And people always say, "Did you get your education?" I go, "Oh yeah, I got my education. All right, I paid for it 5-fold."
Yeah.
But you also, everything's not a winner. So
that's right.
And I learned from those experiences.
Again, chapter in the book.
That's right.
Any plans of going back in and NHL as a manager or anything?
No. So when I finished, so when the boys left to go play junior hockey in the USHL, that was my opportunity to step away from the game coaching, and I did it for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to chase them around. I wanted to follow them. They were playing in the Midwest. They were both in Lincoln, Nebraska. And then 2, I also wanted to see if I was that passionate about coaching, or if I was just coaching because my boys were playing. Mm-hmm. And after being away from it for a year, I didn't miss it.
Yeah.
And as I said, I'd had some opportunities early on out of off my career, but I wasn't mentally or well enough or healthy enough to take advantage of those opportunities. And then as time's gone on, I enjoy my free time way too much. I don't need the stress in my life, and I see a lot of guys I played with, a lot of guys I played against, who are still involved in the game, and it's 12 months a year. I just have no desire to do that.
It probably felt somewhat good to go back and not want to be back in the game, right? To just say, hey, I had fun, man. Put a
Yeah.
lot of time. My kids are in the game. You get a chance to watch and still be involved, but not be, on the ice or part of it, right?
Yeah, and I was always very realistic about my career, and that's why my retirement was hurtful and was painful, but it wasn't the end of the world, because I
The
knew,
beginning.
yeah, because I was 33, 34 years old. Like I've barely begun my life. Like, and that's what I always knew the game was only going to be a certain part of my life, and that I had so much more to live for, and young family and other interests, and so I quickly took those up.
Yeah. So after hockey injuries, right? Concussions, you had some things. How about now, like any pain or any kind of,
So
back or
yeah, no.
knees?
So I was always the one thing, when I played, I was very diligent about stretching.
That's so important.
Yeah,
We never did that as kids. I never did that.
Yeah, and I've got I know so many guys had back and hip and knee and shoulder replacements, and hips and backs are usually the big ones for hockey players, especially if you don't. Skating's not a natural human,
Right.
kinetic movement. You know what I mean? Like, so
Ankles, knees,
yeah,
right?
so
Hips.
hips, the worst. And my brother-in-law who played has had both hips done, both hips, maybe one hip and both knees, but he's had 3 replacements on those 4 joints, and he was not flexible, and so I think I to a fault, actually, I probably overstretched, but my body thanks me now, because I don't have the joint pain that so many of those guys have.
Yeah. Well, Keith, man, it's been a real pleasure today. Thank you so much. Give a little bit of a message to the listeners. The young hockey players trying to come up through, the ranks.
I think it's important that they remember why they're playing the game. They're playing the game for the love of the game, and parents are putting their kids into the game of hockey or any sport, to develop lifelong skills of teamwork and discipline and commitment. You're not doing it because you're foreshadowing a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is like, don't have any expectations other than you're creating good human beings.
That's a great message for sure. Sports is interesting because it's life.
Yeah.
Things don't always go your way.
Yeah.
It's easy to be happy when you win. It's how you feel when you lose.
And to go, even the competition.
Yeah.
Right? The competition of sport, because, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose.
That's right.
Somebody's feelings are going to get hurt and somebody's going to feel good.
Not everybody's happy.
Not everybody's happy, and not everybody wins.
Yeah.
But I always tell my kids, they don't like this analogy, but I always tell them I'd rather be a loser than a quitter.
That's right.
And I lost more games than I care to remember. I certainly never quit.
It's the wins, it's the losses. It's like my kids. I say, hey guys, don't worry about this. Forget about it.
That's right.
Don't cry. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
So, Keith, I think the message from today is, we have these great stories, right? We know who you are, right? You got a huge name, but it's the story, right? It's the path that led you to today. Trials and tribulations through the way, kids at a young age, work-life mix. But it's all about being in the moment and just enjoying, your kids, your family. Once you get out of hockey, you're still a young guy. You get a chance now to just, be the best dad you can be a good example. And that's what it's all about. That's what life's all about.
100%. Yeah.
A couple of questions I always ask the guest are favorite movie. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, that's got to grab that quick, huh?
You a movie guy?
I am.
Yeah.
13 Hours.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That was with, who's in that movie? Wasn't De Niro. It wasn't De Niro.
No. It's the Benghazi one, and I'm trying.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, that's a good one. I've seen that.
Yeah, it's great.
We're a huge movie family.
He's in The Office. I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah.
He's a director as well. But yeah, that's unreal.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
We're a huge movie family. It's
yeah, we
funny
are too.
I remember, you remember too, Blockbuster Video and stuff. But it's like we try to figure out how many movies I've seen. I'm like, I think I've seen probably 5 movies a week. 4 40 years. And it's crazy how many movies we've seen, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny because the movie I've probably seen the most is Dumb and Dumber. You ever seen Dumb and Dumber?
I watched it literally like a week ago.
It's hilarious.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the kids all love it too, but it's funny because you recite these movies. It's just fun.
That's what we're the same way. We recite movie lines and people are like, what movie is that from? We can just
Rattle the whole thing off.
Yeah. Name the movie in a second.
Yeah. How about music?
I like country music. I would say right now, favorite artist would probably be Zach Bryan.
Okay.
But we like doing country music festivals and stuff. So kids are all into country music.
A couple of years ago, I'm not a huge country fan. I am, but I a couple of years back, my wife says we're going to go to a concert, Chris Stapleton.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, another country concert, you know. Chris Stapleton's the man, by the way.
I
saw him live, and I'm like, damn, this guy's good.
He can sing. Yeah.
What I like about it, though, is sort of the humble nature. Still married, seems to love his wife.
Yeah.
Just a normal guy.
Yeah.
Big normal guy.
Yeah.
How about favorite restaurant in town?
Here locally, probably Ruth's Chris.
Love that place.
Yeah,
by the way.
Easy ride for us coming from the neighborhood.
My favorite spot. Me and my wife go there all the time. Let's just go to the bar.
Yeah,
you can always find a
it's
spot
easy.
at the bar, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always an
easy.
opening there.
Yeah. So we enjoy that. I mean, there's lots of great restaurants around, but it's because it's so close and convenient. Yeah.
Keith, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate you. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Sitting down with the man, that's for sure.
Man of my own mind.
Listen, I appreciate everybody watching the episode. You can subscribe, hit the like button, follow me on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and hope you enjoy the show. Love to hear your feedback.